Hello everyone, thank you for tuning into TV2 today. We are doing something unique today, something we've not done in our front porch conversations before. We're actually on the front porch of Peg and Chuck Eckel. Thank you so much for agreeing to the interview today.
Glad to have it.
Our pleasure.
This is a part of our trying to be conscientious about having proper distance during a conversation with anyone. So thank you for joining us today. Would the two of you share with me one at a time where you were born and where you grew up?
Yes. We both were born in Chicago, but I'll go ahead. And grew up in Chicago on the northwest side of, those residents know about that. And in the middle of high school, my folks moved to the suburbs, Elk Grove Village. And that's where I met Peggy. And so we grew up, I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and then continued on at Northern Illinois University before we left that area after college.
And I was born in Chicago, but immediately our family moved to Columbus, Ohio. So my early years were there. Moved back to Chicago, and I was 10 when we moved out to Elk Grove Village. It's huge now, but it was a soybean field when we picked out the lot for the house, and didn't even have a high school. And now we had a high school, and it's already closed because us baby boomers are gone. And then, of course, Chuck's business took us all over the country. So.
Well, tell us about a favorite memory of yours growing up as a child. What did you enjoy doing or favorite memories?
Yeah, I had a fun time as a child in Chicago, and the neighborhood where we lived in was bisected by the Kennedy Expressway in the 50s, and during that time it was constructed about 3 blocks away from where I lived, and cut right through our neighborhood. But didn't matter to us, my buddies and I. During construction, they would be compacting the earth up and down there. On the weekends, they weren't working. We'd take our bikes up there. We'd ride for miles up and down the future expressway on our bikes. And then moving into scouts and into church youth groups and all, and lots of activities associated with school. Those were some fun times growing up.
I loved some of the neighborhoods we had in Chicago. I know none of my friends will believe it, but I was very shy and was by myself a lot. My sister thought she was an only child, so I did my own thing. But going out into the suburbs gave you a whole different perspective of community and a lot more freedom than you had in the city. And your mom handed you a lunch and said, "Come back at dinner," so I was able to do that growing up and loved it.
You have a sibling, at least one, Peggy?
I have 3 sisters. One's passed away, an older one and a much younger one.
So you're the middle child.
I'm the perfect middle child.
She is.
Good comment, Chuck. What about you?
I had one sister, and she passed away at age 23, 24, and we were very close and did a lot of things together. But that's it.
Okay. And how did the two of you meet?
Well, can I tell that story?
Yes.
Yeah. My mother was worked in the doctor's office as a nurse. And in the little Elk Grove Village clinic. And she came home one night and said, "There's a boy that came in today to get his fingers sewed up. He cut it on a head of lettuce. He works at IGA, and I think you ought to go over there and take a look."
Check them out.
So I did, and I'd walk back and forth in front of the store trying to catch him and all. We didn't meet up then, but we both took life-saving class at the local pool and lifeguard class, and that's where we met. And yeah, he was cute. And when it was time for artificial respiration, they teamed Chuck and I up. I was 15, you were 17, I think. Something. And so that was very nice engagement there. And we started dating. So he's been my only boyfriend since I was 15.
And do you agree with that story, Chuck?
I do.
And then from 15 to when did you get married?
I want to see if you know. Yeah.
Well, I was 20 and she was 18.
You were still in college. I was in college.
Yeah. Mhm.
And were you at the same college?
Yes,
So,
he arranged that so nicely.
yeah, so it'll be 54 years this May.
But I went to work and he went on through school and then through his master's, and so it wasn't until after then that we moved for the first time.
And where was the first move you made as a couple?
We moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and after graduate school, I was offered a job with Procter & Gamble, and their headquarters were in Cincinnati, so we started there, and we had our little baby Amy with us, and we spent several years in Cincinnati before we were transferred to elsewhere.
And Amy has siblings?
We have 4 children. Amy is the oldest, then Ellie, Sarah, and Matt, who were born in 70, 71, and 72. So that was 4 children, 6.5 years, and then moved to California with Procter & Gamble, and they just thought we were freaks for having 4 children. And so that was the end of the brood, but it was 3 girls. I'm from a family of 4 girls, so we had 3 girls, and it was a total surprise to have a boy, but he was a good finale.
Peggy, you went to college at some point. Is that right?
Well, I started at Northern,
Uh-huh.
and then started raising the family, and went back to school in California and got my degree in food service management. Came in handy with all those children,
I can imagine.
but didn't use it again until we moved back to Cincinnati.
Chuck, what was your career path with Procter & Gamble?
I started in their corporate data center, and this was in the late '60s, and that was an interesting time where companies were being challenged and trying to balance showing off their computing capacity. On the other hand, they were starting to get hackers and threats to their systems and all. So when I started, the computer center was in the lobby of the central office building with large pane glass windows, and you could see all that IBM power. Shortly thereafter, they went to more higher security, and they built a building in a garage across the street, and they put the data center in there in the basement underground, and you had to go through security to get in, which I did, and we weren't supposed to tell where it was. Well, the Cincinnati Enquirer ran a spread about Procter & Gamble and all of its locations and stuff, and they ended up putting in the newspaper, and they identified all the buildings, and they identified the parking garage in corporate data center right there in the front page of the paper. But anyway, I moved through various projects, and a significant first one was to write the programs for the 1970 stock split, and that's a big deal. And I did it well, and I got recognized for it, so I moved on up and ended up being offered a position in Sacramento, California. And we moved out there, and we had our last child there, and then moved back to Cincinnati for another position, and then in '81 moved to Perry, Florida, where Procter & Gamble had a pulp mill, and they had it up until 1993 when they sold it. And finished my career there. Finished in 2001 after 32 years.
I have to add that on the day of the stock split, the big moment is when our second daughter decided to be born. And so Chuck was nowhere to be found. And my girlfriend took me to the hospital. And he showed up just in time, I'm told. Because daddies weren't part of it back then. But yeah, and then he put a note in front of my face. You've had a girl, I'm going back to work.
Nothing but the facts, ma'am. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I went back to sleep.
Peggy, you said you began your food service career when you moved back to Cincinnati. What did that encompass?
I worked in a department store diner, and then I went to work for General Electric in Cincinnati with 14,000 employees, 9 eating venues, but we were a company of management, and we couldn't, all the employees, food employees were union, so we couldn't touch anything, or they would have needed another union employee. So it was a real task to learn how to manage a venue like that without hands-on, and so it was quite a good experience. But we fed 14,000 people, and even did it through a strike one time where management had to stay and live in the mill, in the company, to feed the rest of the company executives because all the workers went out on strike. And that was a good experience and helpful.
And you got hands-on at that point, didn't you?
Then you got hands-on. Sure did.
Well, I know both of you have a number of different interests, and I know art is one of them, but would you share about that and what other interests you have and enjoy, things you enjoy doing?
We did join the art club, the art guild at the village, and I enjoy that. And that's one of the favorite things at the village. And a few years ago, Lynn Stevens, who's one of the founders, asked me to take over. She was asking to get spin off some of her responsibilities and said take over the art gallery, which is the hanging of photos and pictures at the Loaf and Gopher. And I have really enjoyed that. What we have in the art gallery is sharing residents and staff works of art, and being able to meet folks and get their stories, get their background stories has been fun. I'm also in the wood shop, and I play golf as often as I can with a few guys here and a few guys at my former church in Perry. Keeping up the beds around here. I enjoy that. Rideabout. I'm one of the Rideabout drivers, which is the larger cart. We take families and residents on tours of parts of the village, etc.
And I got started in art back in high school and college, but then raising a family didn't do anything. We looked for 4 years for a house here in the village. We only lived in Perry, so we could come over whenever a house went on sale to find a house that I could have a studio to do my art. And 4 years later, we found the perfect place, which we feel is this house. And I've done all, since you gave me my first art lesson as a gift, professional art lesson as a gift, did a lot of that in the beginning and have never really settled in on what I love the most. Everything from oils to pen and ink to pastels. Right now I'm doing more art involved in card making, journal making. I can't stick on a certain thing, so I do it all. And I always say my cards cost about $30 a piece now to make because I had to buy everything. So.
But they're a work of art.
But they're a work of art. I'm sure you'd want to save them. Yes.
And both of you have volunteered different ways in the village. Chuck, you've had a number of leadership positions, and we appreciate your service doing that as president of the membership. It was council at that point, and on the board of directors as a representative of the village members. And am I missing something?
No, that's it. And I have to say, both those positions were very satisfying with respect to being a liaison or a communication media with the residents and all, and on the membership council, working with you, for example, you were our connection to the administration and all, and you're very helpful in all ways. Really appreciate that. And the time on the board, to meet folks in the Advent Christian community across the nation, and the talent of the people on the board was so impressive, and their commitment to the mission of the village. It was very evident, and during those 4 years I was with them, I really appreciated that.
And Peggy, you volunteer in a number of ways.
When we first got here, you generally want to jump right in, and and everybody asks you to volunteer for something. So I did work at the Riverside Gift Shop and enjoyed that. Then I gave tours to prospective residents, and I loved that, meeting people that may not come for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they're there, and it's wonderful. I also participated in a lot of one-time things, banquets and decorating for with a committee of ladies for different events here in the village, and I really enjoy that. And I lead a Bible study twice a month here in the neighborhood, and I'm doing something else.
Well, now it's face masks.
Well, now it's face masks, and I can't think of anything else but face masks. I wake up thinking of them, and I go to bed thinking of them. So that's been a delight to meet a lot of ladies who wanted to volunteer and that I had never met. And they all have wonderful stories, and so that's been fun.
You alluded to having lived for our trying to find the right home here for 4 years. What was your initial introduction to the village?
When we moved to Perry in '81, Procter and Gamble, their various sites are big in United Way, those kinds of things, and there wasn't one in Perry, but the site had a employees community service fund, which was the equivalent. So it was just our company instead of all the outfits in town. And so I was asked to be on that board, and the next thing I knew, I was president. And each year, as we tried to set up our budget and our campaign for raising funds, etc., it was customary to the places that benefited from our donations and all to ask them to update us on their mission and what their needs were. And so I ended up sending a letter to the village, and I don't remember who was president then or who was in charge of responding and all, but I got the letter back, and I was quite impressed, and Advent Christian Village was one of our beneficiaries. And so I became aware of them, and then our church had church retreats for the session, our board of elders, once a year, and they ended up having it in the lodge conference room, and then staying Friday night, start our session Friday night at the lodge, and continue through Saturday morning, and did that for a number of years. They're not doing that anymore. So I got more acquainted, and then over the years, lots of people from our church ended up residing here, and then our time came for encouraging my mother to move here, and she moved down from Chicago in '01, and passed away in '07, and just loved it. She lived in Carter House. And so there were frequent trips over here to visit her and bring her back for activities in Perry, etc. So over that time, we decided, that would be a place for us when we're ready to downsize and retire.
I actually, when we lived in Perry, got a monthly membership just to use the inside pool. I needed it for therapy, and it was a perfect place. And then I could visit with his mom also while I was here. And like most people, when we first told people we were moving to the village, they asked which one of us was going to the nursing home. They didn't realize what a vital community it is other than the nursing home. So we've introduced a lot of people to that idea, and we just love where we are. We love our neighbors and everything.
Well, welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do either of you have a life-changing experience you'd like to share?
There's many life-changing, I think, for me, but I think, retirement was life-changing. And I retired from Procter & Gamble and its successor in '01. And Peggy and I, in '01, became Stephen leaders for the Stephen Ministry Program. And for the next 4 or 5 years, we trained 17 lay people in our church to be Stephen ministers, and they would have one-on-one care with those who've gone through various crises, loss of a spouse or health issues or loss of a job, etc. That was very enriching, just to lead that and see God at work in that. At the same time, our church was in a new campus outside of downtown, and we were going through the building of the sanctuary, and a large piece of the decorative beams and the sconces inside the building and other things around the sanctuary, the men and women of the church did it themselves, and I took, since I was retired, took a leadership role in that. And that was for a couple of years. That was like a full-time job in that way, and life-changing in that regard. Very, very different. All volunteer instead of being paid. And then I moved into '05, and a friend from the church had moved to Tallahassee to take on the role of CEO of a community health center, and he invited me to join him in the stage that they had a contract to buy software for electronic health records, and so I took that on for a year or two. Was the thought, but it kept growing and ended up being 9 years, and that was a whole new career and life changing in itself. And then finally retired after we moved here.
Yeah, he was still working when we moved here.
Yeah.
My turns in my life story generally revolve around, surprisingly to me, different religious experiences. Having grown up just as a, suburban church-going kid, and going through college and the normal things you do then, I got involved in Jehovah's Witnesses during college, and that certainly did a 180 degree on my spiritual beliefs. Long story, won't give it to you, but luckily through the grace of God was able to leave that cult, and I consider it a cult, with hardly any faith at all. And then it was interesting after we moved to Perry to be involved almost immediately in the way God does things with a spiritual movement called Crescio, and that brought me back to my roots and a better understanding and a much more mature understanding of my faith. And ever since then, I've been really excited about faith in the Lord and what He's doing in our lives, which really helps in a time like this.
Yes, it does. Thank you for sharing that as memories, both of you. What is on your bucket list of things you want to accomplish?
Well, at 74, I've knocked off many bucket list things, but they're oriented toward, I think number one is just continuing with family and being engaged with them. We're very proud of our 8 grandkids and how their lives are developing, and one of them's married and the other one's with a significant other. So family's a big thing to continue on the bucket list, and travel and the hobbies that we kind of talked about.
Peggy?
Well, it's fun. We have 4 children married, and their kids are grown. They're empty nesters now, but they all live in this area. They're all within 60 miles. So when it's not virus time, we get together a lot, and we want to continue that. Looking forward to great-grandchildren, if you've seen this. But we do want to do some more traveling. We've been all over the world traveling, and I think we'd like to see more of this country and Canada probably. We go to Maine for a month every summer and enjoyed seeing the different cultures. We came from Chicago and moved to Kentucky, so that was a new culture. And then moving to the South was a new culture. So there's lots to do still in travel, as long as we have the health to do it.
Peggy, you mentioned to me a gift that your children had given you that's got you doing another project. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Christmas time. They got together and gave us a gift where each of us, a company that prompts you to write a little story once a week. They give you a question, and you write a little story about your life involving that question. So Chuck's got one and I have one. And at the end of the 52 weeks, they will publish it into a hardbound book, and we can add pictures and all. It's been a great way to reflect over things that you don't talk about over the dinner table with your kids, and you're growing up, and things they don't know, and that if you don't tell them, once we're gone, those stories will be lost. So I'm very excited about it, and being able to do it. Chuck's better at keeping up with his than I am, but after the masks, I'll be back at it. And I think I think it's a wonderful thing for, if you can't share with your grandchildren one-on-one, to leave that legacy, write letters that they may never see till you're gone, but it's a great idea.
I think that's great. Tell me something that you would give as advice to a younger person.
You're good at advice. Go ahead.
No, you're better at advice. You go ahead.
How young?
You choose.
Me choose. I think when you're married couples, this is the one thing I don't see much of since the last few decades, is in a marriage, your spouse is more important than your children. He or she really comes first, and I've tried to share that with our children, and when they're dating, pick someone because the kids will be gone, and that's your life mate, and they're really more, it's God and your spouse and then your children. Children don't come first. They don't always like to hear that, but it's helped. And it helps through the rough times too.
I think building
Go ahead.
Building on that, recognizing your role with those around you, your family, your church, your job, your community, And just thinking about your role with them, for example, what Peggy said about your spouse and your role and the importance and priority of that, so that you can respond when things come up and something happens instead of reacting with some advice. You shouldn't be doing that, etc. But you can respond and kind of penetrate. What was the issue and why are you angry about that or whatever? Why are you making that choice? Those two kinds of things. I think those are important advice.
My other advice is clean your coffee pot with vinegar once in a while.
I think that's a real important one. Thank you so much for this conversation today and for sharing your lovely front porch
Thank you.
and arranging for the nice breeze that we have today.
Certainly.
Thank you for tuning in. We're going to be doing more front porch conversations, and some of them will actually be on the front porch. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.